Homily for the 23rd Sunday of the year A. Mutual correction in the Christian community. Our readings for this Sunday are from Ezekiel chapter 33 verse 7 to 9, Romans chapter 13 verse 8 to 10, and the Gospel of St. Matthew chapter 18 verse 15 to 20. Perhaps the central virtue of all religions is compassion. Compassion can be described as a state where one's heart breaks at the sight of another person's suffering. In several passages, the Bible warns against hardness of heart because a hardened heart can lose the capacity for compassion. Now, the difference between hardened heart and softened heart. A hard heart is a stony heart that cannot feel, that cannot respond, that cannot love, that cannot be hurt or be broken. A hard heart is a barren heart. It is a closed heart. It is a heart that can neither experience sorrow nor true joy. Hardness of heart makes one invulnerable, insensitive, and incapable of compassion. A hardened heart is the most serious ailment of all ailments. To harden one's heart is to live for oneself alone, shutting out the neighbor, the community, and ultimately shutting out God. To harden one's heart is to refuse help from anyone, to make redemption impossible, and to destroy oneself permanently and irreversibly. To harden our hearts against one another is bad enough, but to harden our hearts against God is the ultimate calamity. It means that God Himself is not allowed to get through into us. On the other hand, a soft heart is open, easily broken, easily hurt, and vulnerable. A softened heart can receive, can be touched, can be moved, and can collapse. A softened heart is a blessing. It can be warmed, it can respond, it can burst into life. Some of the best references to hardness of heart revolve around the events that led to the exodus of the children of Israel from Egypt and their experiences in the wilderness, especially the encounter at Massa and Meribah. See Exodus chapter 7 verse 13, Ezekiel chapter 3 verse 7, Psalm 95 verse 8, Hebrews 3, 8 and 15, Matthew 19 verse 8. God does not force anyone or force Himself into the heart of anyone in order to save or make friend with us. God respects our freedom to choose to respond to His love or to fortify our hearts against Him. The greatest tragedy is not to have a broken heart. Hearts are indeed meant to be broken. Therefore, the greatest tragedy is to have a heart that is incapable of being broken. Now, Jesus came to soften our hard hearts, to open our hearts to our neighbor and to God, to open our hearts to love. He came to purify our hearts, to sow the seed of God's word into our hearts, to turn our hearts from wastelands into fertile grounds, and to melt our stony hearts. When we hear the voice of God and pay attention to His word, everything changes. Yet, the hardest thing for human beings is to change. Softened by the rain of God's grace and warmed by the sun of His love, the human heart can be transformed from a desert into fertile garden. Courageous confrontation and creative conflict. What is our usual way of responding when offended or when injured by a neighbor? Perhaps the most common reactions include keeping to oneself unwilling to talk about it or pretending that everything is okay, brooding over the injury and magnifying it, becoming depressed over it, especially when the offender is more powerful than the offended, cutting off the offender, or talking about it with others who will sympathize with us but are of no help. But Jesus shows us another way, a Christian way. It is that we first confront the erring person directly and talk things over honestly and in all humility. Confronting the offender should not be in anger, not arrogantly, not just to appease one's wounded ego, but out of genuine concern. And care is to be taken in confronting an erring person. If we are too harsh, we cause more harm, as the person's heart may become further hardened. The whole aim is not to score a point against the person, but to help to amend this person's ways and foster reconciliation. Because for Jesus Christ, reconciliation is better than sacrifice. See Matthew chapter 5, verse 23 to 24. Belonging to a Christian community implies being involved in the life of its members. It also means that you belong to a church not only physically but also emotionally. We must take seriously the fact that doing nothing in the face of evil means doing evil, because to ignore evil is to become an accomplice to it. He who passively accepts evil is as much involved in it as he who helps to perpetuate it. We must always remember that we are each responsible for all. So, to watch someone doing something wrong and not to try to stop him is to be part of the wrong the person is doing. Keeping silent in the face of immorality, injustice, corruption, and wickedness often amounts to aiding and abetting the evil. Genuine love and courageous confrontation. Mutual love should breed mutual concern. Mutual concern should bring about mutual correction, and mutual correction will necessitate courageous confrontation or creative conflict. Some people spend their whole life running away from conflict. For them, all conflicts are to be avoided, but that is not the reality of life. In real life, conflict is a regular occurrence, and that is why we all need some basic conflict management skills. Confrontation can sometimes be the only language of love. Some parents think they love their children so well that they never confront them over any misdemeanor. Some of these children could turn out to become social deviants. Sometimes even husbands and wives do shy away from necessary confrontation. Unfortunately, the refusal to confront can sometimes mean the refusal to love. Instances of courageous confrontation in the scriptures include Prophet Nathan, who confronted David, 2 Samuel chapter 12, verse 1 to 12. Elijah, who confronts the 400 prophets of Baal, 1 Kings chapter 18. Daniel confronts the lustful elders, Daniel chapter 13. John the Baptist confronts Herod, Matthew 14. Jesus confronts temple marketers, Matthew 21. Paul confronts the case of incest in Corinth, 1 Corinthians 5. And Paul confronts Peter on hypocrisy, Galatians chapter 2. When an offense or a scandal takes place, we should not keep silent. We should not allow the issue to fester. Rather than hold a grudge, we must do something about it right away. For according to the Irish philosopher Edmund Burke, all it takes for evil to triumph is that good people do nothing and say nothing. God bless you.